Let's look at example 3, how to factor perfect square trinomials. Now the special thing about these special patterns is the fact that the number 9 and the number 64 have perfect square roots. If you think about 9, 9 is 3 times 3. If you think about 64, it's 8 times 8. So we can factor this particular example in a quicker fashion because we already know that 3x times 3x will give us 9x squared. And we know if we took a negative 8 and a positive 8, the 8 times 8 would give me 64, and because it's a negative times a positive, it would give me a negative there. Now if I look at my outside and inside terms, here I get my first term, that was going to give me 9x squared. If I look at my last term, or my outside term, it's going to give me plus 24x. If I look at my inside term, it's a minus 24x. And if I look at my outside terms, or last terms, it's going to give me a negative 64. And you'll notice that these are exact opposites of each other. So they'll cancel each other out. How convenient. So now we have 9x squared minus 64. So I know that I factored it correctly into 9x minus, or 3x minus 9. Let's try that again. 3x minus 8 and 3x plus 8. Let's look at another example. Here I want you to look at the last term, or the first term and the last term. You'll notice again that 4 has a perfect square root and that 25 has a perfect square root. Well, let's see if we can somehow write factors so that we end up with outside and inside terms that add up to 20. So if you think about 4, its perfect square root would be 2. And if we think about 25, its perfect square root would be 5. And because this number in the middle is positive, I'm going to make both of these positive. So now when we multiply these together, you're going to get 4y squared. Multiply these together, it's plus 10y. Multiply your insides, that's another plus 10y. And if we multiply your last, that's plus 25. So if we combine our like terms, we get 4y squared plus 20y plus 25. So I know that I factored it correctly because they were perfect squares and we could take the square root. Let's look at another example. Here if we look at our first term and our last term, again 36 has a perfect square root of 6 and 1 has a perfect square root of 1. So let's put the perfect square roots in the front. 6w, 6w. The perfect square root in the back is 1 and 1. Now if you look at this, this has to be a negative, so I'm actually going to make both of these signs negative. Because if I multiply those parts together, that gives me 36w squared. If I multiply these parts together, it's a negative 6w. If I multiply these parts together, it's another negative 6w. And if I multiply those together, it's plus 1. So if I look at combining my like terms, I'm going to get 36w squared minus 12w plus 1, which is what I started with, so I know that I factored it correctly. Let's look at another example. Here again we have two numbers that have perfect square roots. The square root of 81 is 9. The square root of 25 is 5. So let's use that information to factor. We're going to have 9x in the front here, 9x in the front here. We're going to have minus 5 here, and plus 5 here. The reason I have a plus and the minus is because I don't have a middle term in this, so I know I want my outside and inside terms to cancel each other out. So let's look at multiplying those together. That's going to give me 81x squared. My outside will give me plus 45x. If I look at my inside terms, it's minus 45x. And if I look at my last terms, it's minus 25. You'll notice again that these terms conveniently cancel each other out. So we're left with 81x squared minus 25. So I know that my factorization was correct. Let's look at another example. Here I have 49. Well, that has a perfect square root of 7. And here I have 64, which has a perfect square root of 8. So let's use that to factor our expression. We're going to have 7x plus 8 and another plus 8. And I used positive because I saw that the middle was going to be positive. So let's check this just to make sure that we did it right. We get 49x squared. I look at my outside terms, that's plus 56x. If I look at my inside terms, it's another 56x. If I look at my last terms, that's plus 64. So if I look at my middle terms, that's going to add up to 112. So we have 49x squared plus 112x plus 64. So we know that we factored it correctly. Let's look at our next example. Here we have a 9 and 121. Now the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 121 is 11. So let's use that information. We'll have 3r, 3r. And because this is negative, I'm going to use a negative here, so minus 11, minus 11. So let's check to make sure that we factored it correctly. If we multiply that together, we're going to get 9r squared. If we multiply this, we're going to get a negative 33r. If I multiply this, it's going to give me a negative 33r. And when we multiply this, it's plus 121. Now these are both negative, so when we combine them, we're going to get minus 66r plus 121. So now I know that I factored this correctly. And that is the end of example 3. Have a great day. Bye-bye.